Teachers of Reddit, what is the most frisky thing you've seen while being a teacher? Story 1. Posted this on a similar one once, but applies here. Currently a teacher at a secondary school in the UK, where a student with additional needs likes to have a wank at the back of his classes. He's done it once in mine, I'm male, and at least twice in a female colleague, so he's not picky or anything. He just likes to tickle his pickle when he can. Had to bring the parents in, and apparently it's all the rage at home too. Even dinner isn't off limits, as mom's caught him with pasta in one hand and his little friend in the other before. It's the little things that make this the noble profession. Story 2. Not a teacher, but in 10th grade, my history class was covering World War II and the Holocaust, so the teacher had us watch Schindler's List in class. For those who haven't seen the movie, there is a scene where the Nazi camp guards line up the prisoners completely naked. Children, men, and women of all age groups were lined up and nothing was censored. Truly a horrific scene in a sad but fantastic movie. Out of the corner of my eye, I see one of my classmates tugging it under the desk, willy in hand, while looking at the screen very intensely. The teacher walked over and sat on the back tables next to his desk, and he stopped. After the bell rung, the teacher asked my classmate to stay and talk to her. I can only imagine the conversation they had, or how the teacher mentally prepped herself for that kind of talk. Obviously, being in 10th grade, we gave the guy crap about it for the entire rest of the year. This is the kind of activity that will result in you being placed in a different classroom under direct supervision. Once you cross that public tugging line, there is no going back. I hope the teacher brought in some backup too, like a principal or something, because I would like to think the school was going to do more about it than just a little chat with the teacher. It's wrong on many levels, but one of those levels has to be the fact that it was done while watching a movie about the Holocaust. I mean, really, dude? Really? Story 3. A few years back, a teacher at my school had inappropriate pics taken for her husband and wanted to email them to him. She scanned them on a printer at work and uploaded them to a shared public directory, thinking she was uploading them to a private folder, which I still don't know why she thought this was a good idea. Needless to say, it didn't take long for someone to find her pics on the shared directory. Story 4. I teach middle school literature and theater. First year of teaching, after a rehearsal when I thought all my students had been picked up, I went back to the stage to collect a few things. Walked in on 2 8th graders getting super touchy-feely. Guy had gotten her shirt off and was working on removing her bra. And I'm not sure who was more embarrassed, me or the kids. Turned my back, told them to get dressed and get to the front doors. Immediately called both families, and both were pretty cool with it, all things considered. Worst part was, about 3 minutes into the conversation with the girl's father, he realized I'd seen her without a shirt on. I don't think I made eye contact with either one of them for the rest of the year. Story 5. Not a teacher, but my mother was, and she has a lot of great stories. But one in particular comes to mind. Some elementary school classrooms have very large metal ceiling fans. I haven't been to an elementary school in some time, but I know growing up that I remembered them. Not sure if they are still in use now. Anyway, the ones I had in class growing up always had a large metal cage surrounding the fan so that no one would get hit by it. And they are very powerful and made out of metal. One day, my mom was sitting in the classroom late after school grading papers at her desk. She talked about how she was always friendly with the janitor that would come in and clean the classroom at the end of the day, and enjoyed chatting with him while he did his job. She's sitting there grading papers, and all of a sudden, bang! She looks up, and he's been flung across the room and landed a bloody mess in a pile of desks. He'd been dusting the overhead lights on a stepladder when the metal ceiling fan caught him in the head, split his forehead open, blood everywhere. My mom uses the rags from the blackboard to apply pressure and stop the bleeding the best she could. Called 911 and the paramedics showed up. And apparently there was so much blood at this point that she joked about one of the paramedics being lightheaded and having to sit for a moment outside. In the end, the janitor was all right. And my mom was on some old TV show called Rescue 911 or something like that for applying the pressure and reducing the guy's blood loss. This, and I'm sure other incidents, are the reason these metal ceiling fans now have the cage enclosure I remember from my elementary classrooms. Definitely not safe for work. This gruesome scene could have been far, far worse. Can you imagine what horrible trauma it would have been for that teacher if she witnessed a decapitation in her classroom? I'm not sure how someone would ever recover from that. Glad that she was at least there to help, because if the janitor had this happen while no one was in the classroom, this could be a different story. Apparently, these fans are much stronger than the regular wooden household ones, which you can stop with your hand. Do not try this at home. Story 6. I caught one of my female students doing it with her 21-year-old boyfriend in the upper floor. I was going to take a personal call and I wanted better reception, so I went up the stairs thinking that I could make the call by the window up there. As I made my way up, I immediately froze as I saw her boyfriend getting off her, and she yelled, "Oh my God!" and immediately tried to get up. I quickly turned around to look at the wall. At this point, I saw everything, both of them, and I nervously yelled at the wall, "What are you doing? Please get dressed this instant!" I ran down the stairs to ask my coworker to call security because I didn't recognize the bearded young man and just waited for them to take over. They were both taken to the principal's office, and I'm not sure what happened to them, though. A little while, the principal interviewed me for questions and the police, and neither of them seemed surprised by it. Just another issue in their day, I guess. I still see her in the hallways, and we avoid eye contact. So awkward. I feel sad for her, though, because I think she's one of those girls with a reputation. Chapter 7. I had been fired from a great job. I was doing everything I could to make ends meet for my family, including substitute teaching. It's 1996. For my first job, I got a phone call and said that I could teach ISS for a whole week. All the other jobs were just for a day, but a week? I'm in. I didn't know what ISS was. ISSS is in-school suspension. On Monday, everything goes okay. Teachers send work to me. The boys, no girls in this class, don't do it, and I make sure everyone stays seated and reasonably quiet. All is well. On Tuesday, this big Hispanic kid brings in a bag with him to class and sits it next to him. I don't react immediately. Really, I don't even notice at first. I'm not good at this. But it dawns on me around 10 a.m. that he's guarding the bag and being kind of weird about it, weird enough for me to notice. I ask him to come up to my desk and we chat about it. I ask him to bring me the bag and open it for me just to peek inside. Nope. I ask him if I could open it then and peek inside. Nope. I'm nervous. I have created a situation I don't know a way to de-escalate from here. So, I threaten him with calling the officer in. Don't do that, he says, but also won't let me see inside the bag. I ask him to take a seat and tell him not to worry. The officer will be here and take a peek, and it's no big deal, just for the safety of everyone. Unless it's drugs or a gun, you won't get in trouble, I say, trying to see if he would respond. Nothing. Ice cold killer. The officer arrives and he doesn't do anything special, just grabs the bag, opens it, and starts rummaging around inside of it. Nothing unusual, but a box that holds cards, with a naked girl on the outside. He opens the card box and finds a Playboy deck of cards with girls in various poses on them. The officer asks him if that's it, and he says yes. The kid gets his cards confiscated and gets booted from ISS to full suspension. I feel bad about it and told him so. I said, we could have had just handled this like men, and I take your cards and you stay here, and you just had to be honest with me. I'm sorry you're getting suspended. That really is too bad that the kid needed to be suspended. He should have just talked to the teacher, who would have likely been really cool with him and fair. Like, hey, I'm going to take these inappropriate cards for now, bring them home with me for research, and then I'll give them back to you, but you cannot bring them to school anymore, understand? And they probably could have had that conversation without the parents getting to hear about it. But once you get the police involved, it's sort of impossible to not notify the parents of what's up. Poor kid. Story 8. Well, I was a student, but I walked in on 2 teachers doing it in the staff toilet. I had left class because I was feeling sick, and that was the closest restroom to my classroom. Walked back out and vomited in the hallway afterwards. It was all very bizarre. They helped me to clean up, though, and I went home, and we never mentioned anything. It was still awkward between them and myself after that, obviously. Story 9. Not a teacher, but a staff member at a cadet camp. I was 17 at the time, and I had to stay in a 20-man room with all the other cadets whilst we are on camp. Everything's going fine, and I wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I actually catch 3 cadets playing Soggy Biscuit in the middle of a full 20-man room at like 3 in the morning. Later that day, I had to not only call their parents, the cadets were all under the age of like 15 to 17, but also explain to them why their sons were not only being removed from the camp, but kicked out of the cadets. By far the most awkward experience of my life so far. Story 10. Oh boy, I've seen some things, but this was probably the worst. I was in special education and tasked with working with a very smart but very behaviorally challenged boy. There was a day where each student was tasked with making a short vlog about their favorite book and then presenting it, essentially in front of the entire class of around 100 students. Long story short, he was found with his iPad down his pants, and it had turned out he had taken multiple inappropriate pics with the intention of presenting them for everyone to see. And for the most part, the kid walked off scot-free. Life of working in a very wealthy school district. I ran away from education as fast as I could, and now I work in computers. Story 11. In high school, there was a class held in the computer lab, and on this particular day, they were doing project presentations. Each student would take turns going into the front computer, which was hooked up to a projector, broadcasting everything on screen for the whole class to see, and then they do their thing. Now this kid, let's call him Tom, goes up and plugs in his USB to retrieve his PowerPoint. The file window pops up and there's a folder called Do Not Open. The teacher, being a bit of a jokester himself, immediately calls Tom out about the folder, saying something about how bad could it be. Clicks on the folder and immediately finds another one titled Seriously, Do Not Open. Tom tries to intervene and the teacher clicks again. Hundreds and hundreds of inappropriate pics, some from girls who go to high school, are displayed by the projector. Each pic was labeled by name, and some girls were even sitting in that room. Teacher rips the USB out of its socket, throws it back to Tom, and presentations continue as usual. I'm a little concerned as to how Tom has these images. Were all of these given to him by these girls voluntarily, or did Tom just out himself as a serial peeper who has a camera set up in the girls' locker room? Hopefully the teacher did a little bit more follow-up investigation as to the origin of the inappropriate images. I bet he also learned a valuable lesson about taking warning labels seriously. In the comments, has anyone else had something embarrassing of yours shown to the entire class? Story 12. School psychologist here in a school for kids with behavioral and emotional disabilities. I've seen some stuff. My first year, there was an angry high school kid who was having a hard time in gym class. So I was called to help out. I was standing by the door talking to the gym teacher, and he threw a basketball at me as hard as he could. I didn't see it coming, and it bounced off the wall right next to my head, missing me by less than an inch. I turned to him and yelled, "You missed!" Yeah, it was my first year. He was pissed but started laughing, and I turned around to go back down the hall. He walked after me with one of the aides and yelled down the hall, "Yo, Dr. Scotty, I did your girlfriend last night." I was a little surprised and thought for a second and responded, "How was she?" I'm sure he was expecting me to yell or something, so he said, "Wait, what?" To which I said, "Hey, you said you slept with my girlfriend last night. If that's the case, then I'm curious. How was she? Good?" His response, "She was too tight for me." I then laughed and said, "That's your complaint? Man, you have a lot to learn about women if that's what you're complaining about." And he was not happy. 10 minutes later, he was in my office playing chess with me, which was a testament to our rapport. But that's probably one of the worst things a student has ever said to me. I've dealt with kids being violent or threatening, and once I stopped a kid from going after a teacher with a fire extinguisher. But that interaction has always stuck with me. There are a couple cool things about this story. One, I appreciate the psychologist's creativity, humor, and the way he handled his comeback. It probably was not the immediate thought or response to come back with a funny comment like that, and if he had yelled at the kid, he might have ruined some of that rapport. Secondly, it's pretty cool that he still kept the door open for conversation and therapy with the kid. This interaction probably strengthened their relationship even more, and the kid likely knew that he could trust the psychologist and open up. Story 13. I'm a substitute teacher, so my working day is different to the one before. I got called last minute to cover for an art teacher. It's a nice, easy subject, work's already set. I'm basically just babysitting for this one. At the end of the lesson, some girls start screaming, "Sir, sir, 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 there's blood here, someone's bleeding, someone's hurt." So I immediately ran over in panic and saw a pretty big pool of dark red on the floor right under a very uncomfortable looking girl. I checked around the room and there's no injury, no screams or no tears. Nobody has left the room in a hurry or has run off to first aid. So I stand there absolutely puzzled where this blood came from, until it clicked. The uncomfortable-looking girl asked if she could go to the bathroom straight away, but I dismissed her in the normal way to not arouse suspicion from the class. But I'm pretty sure it was an accident from her, and I was indeed looking down at a pool of blood under her chair. I dismissed the class to lunch a couple minutes early, and I assured them along the lines of, "Don't worry, everyone, it's just paint. I don't mind who spilled it on the floor. I'll clean it up for you guys. Have a nice day." Yada yada yada, and off they went, now believing it was spilled paint. I then called for the caretaker to come clean it up with me, and then I ran over to Human Resources just to document what had happened. We have to report things like this as soon as we can. And as soon as I walk into the room, I see the girl sitting there on a couch in absolute tears of embarrassment, being reassured by the staff member. Long story short, but the teacher thanked me, the girl thanked me, and we went on our days after that. I know teenagers are smart, but I'd like to think that either only a few of the girls actually realized what happened and then bit their tongues about it, or the rest of the class actually just believed it was paint. I still worry about that girl because I know something like this happening at such a young age in school had the potential to really blow up into bullying. But I do hope she got out of it as clean as I hope she did, and nothing came of it for her sake. Story 14. As an engineer working on a lot of K-12 projects, There was a high school that we had been asked to design renovations for. This was a brand new school, like less than 5 years since it opened. So really unusual to see work so soon. Most of it was pretty minor things, knocking out walls to make 2 classrooms into 1, AV rework in the cafeteria, but one part of the design called for adding teachers' lounges at the end of these hallways on the 2nd and 4th floors. Basically, when the original architect designed the school, they added this glass wall feature on one end, and it extended out from the school in an arc and was twice as wide as the corridors, and on levels 2 and 4, they extended the floor into this feature. But basically, it was just dead space. Big mistake. The reason we were converting this space into teachers' lounges, they would constantly find students sneaking back to the sides of this feature that weren't visible from the corridor, and certainly any security cameras to perform extracurricular activities. So yeah, the students proved to have a better imagination than the architect who designed the school. Story 15. I'm a teacher, but this one actually comes from my mom. She was a special education teacher for most of her career. Early on in her career, she taught at a rather rough middle school, and she had a class that was specifically for emotionally handicapped students. They had normal or even high capabilities, but they often had been abused and had really serious behavior problems. She had one student who was quiet and had occasional outbursts but was otherwise not a serious problem case. Once, she was asked by another teacher to administer a test for him. This was common, so she had an area of the room designated for test taking. It was basically a corner with cubicle walls around a desk. She went back to check on this student and he was jacking it. She coughed to get his attention and then turned around and walked out, assuming he'd come out right away. Yeah, he didn't. He finished before coming out both the test and otherwise, and then he didn't really mention it. These must have been some really hot questions which were on the test. The multiple choice questions are getting him all hot and bothered, apparently. I don't know if he considered it a form of stress relief for the test anxiety or what, but why feel the need to do this in the classroom? Bathrooms are a thing, right? And given his lack of any reaction to what he was doing, this seems to be a pretty routine thing for him.